The chipped formica of a break room table. I saw one just like it yesterday, and it all came rushing back. It was late summer, almost unbearably humid, and I was starting my second year at the accounting firm. We'd just moved into a new office park, all glass and open floor plans, and everything still felt a little too clean, a little too new. It was there in that brightly lit space that a coworker first asked me for help with a personal matter. The chipped formica was still there, of course. It always was. I'd absent-mindedly run my thumb over the edge 100 times, tracing the little crescent-shaped missing piece. It was just weird, the way Trudy was looking at me this morning. Not at me, exactly. More like through me. She was getting coffee, same as always, and she just paused, right in front of my table. She didn't say anything. She didn't even blink, it felt like. Just stared, but not seeing anything. It was probably nothing. Trudy's always been a bit spacey. Maybe she was thinking about that pottery class she mentioned last week. Or maybe she had a headache. Still, it lingered. She finally shook her head, like she was clearing something, and went back to the machine. But she'd angled her body away, like she didn't want to face me directly. I tried to focus on my emails. Irene had sent over the Peterson file, and I needed to reconcile the quarterly statements. Numbers are comforting, in a way, concrete. Unlike that, the weirdness with Trudy. Then I noticed it. The mug. It wasn't one of the company mugs, it was ceramic. Hand-painted with little blue flowers. Trudy never brings her own mugs. She always uses the standard issue white ones. I remember because she complained about the chipped handles once. It's a small thing, but it just felt off. Like a prop in a play that wasn't supposed to be there. Maybe she's taking up pottery and she's proud of her work. That's it. A new hobby. People do that. It's good for them. I finished reviewing the Peterson file and closed my laptop. I needed air. The break room felt stale. I just wanted to get back to my desk. I started taking the stairs. 4 flights. It added 10 minutes to my commute. But the elevator felt wrong. It wasn't anything specific. Just the way the doors hesitated a beat too long before closing, and the music. Some tinny instrumental version of a song I couldn't place. I began timing it, just to be sure. It always started at the same point in the lobby, always the same few bars before the doors opened on my floor. It was probably just a glitch. Old building maintenance probably hadn't bothered to update the system, still. My desk felt off too. Not messy. I keep a pretty tidy workspace, but moved. Just a centimeter or two, but enough that I noticed my monitor wasn't quite aligned with the edge. I'd straightened it before leaving the night before. I was sure of it, and the pen holder. I always keep the black pen on the right. It was on the left. It was probably just me being tired. Stress. I'd been pulling long hours on the Henderson account. Then I noticed the file folders. I'd left them stacked neatly, alphabetical. Now, the Peterson file, the one I'd been working on in the break room, was on top. Not just on top, but angled slightly forward, like someone had deliberately pulled it out and then replaced it. I checked the security footage for the floor. Nothing. No one entered or left after I'd locked up. I rechecked the timestamps, rewound, fast-forwarded. Nothing. It had to be Tam. He's always playing pranks, that kind of thing. He'd been giving me weird looks lately, too. A little too intense. He must have a keycard he isn't supposed to have and is sneaking in to mess with me. That's the only explanation. I'm going to talk to him, but not now. I'm going to grab a coffee first. Maybe that will help me think straight. The coffee barely touched the anxiety. It tasted burnt, even though I'd made it myself. Back at my desk, everything looked normal, which was honestly worse. It meant I'd imagined it. The shifted desk, the file, all just stress. I started going through emails trying to focus on the Miller report, but I kept glancing at the stairwell door. It was just open. It shouldn't have been. I always made sure it latched when I went for coffee. I told myself someone else must have come up. Maybe Trudy needing to get something from storage, but Trudy works on the 3rd floor. Why would she be up here? I stood and walked towards it, slowly. Each step felt loud, echoing in the quiet office. I peered around the corner. Empty. just the dim, flickering fluorescent light at the bottom of the stairs. Then I heard it, a scraping, like something being dragged across the concrete floor, coming from inside the stairwell, not heavy, not a body, but persistent, like a chair or a box. I froze, it stopped. Dead silence. I told myself it was the building settling. Old buildings do that, but the hairs on my arms were standing up. I was about to turn back when the metal door at the very bottom of the stairwell, the one leading to the service elevator, clanged open. Not a smooth electronic whir, but a harsh metallic clang and a shadow. Just a fleeting glimpse, too quick to make out anything specific, but definitely a shape moving against the light. I didn't think, I just bolted. Back to my desk, grabbed my bag, and practically ran for the elevator. I hit the button so many times it felt like it wouldn't work. When the doors finally opened, Garrett was inside, looking annoyed. He just stared at me. "Rough night?" he asked. I couldn't even answer. I just rushed in and mashed the lobby button. I needed to get out of here now. The lobby felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, but like walking into a room where everyone's been told a joke you didn't hear. People were avoiding my gaze. Trudy at reception didn't even look up when I said goodnight. She usually asks about my weekend. I chalked it up to exhaustion. I really needed sleep. Monday was worse. Lena barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was clipped and formal. Cleo, who always gossiped with me about the office drama, pretended I wasn't there. It was like I'd suddenly developed a contagious disease. Then I found the note, tucked under my monitor, a single typewritten line. The balance remains. My stomach dropped. It couldn't be. Not this. Not after all this time. That stupid loan from college, the one I'd paid off or thought I had years ago. Tam. It had to be Tam. He was the only one who knew. He was always observant. He'd made that little comment back then about how debts had a way of finding you. I'd laughed it off. I went to HR, to Irene. I explained about the note, about the feeling of being ostracized, about Tam and the old loan. She listened politely, then said it sounded like office politics. She suggested mediation. She pulled up my personnel file, her face tightening as she scanned something. "There's a discrepancy here," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "An unresolved financial obligation related to a company expense account from several years ago." It wasn't the college loan. It was something else. Something from here. Something I didn't even remember. Irene wouldn't meet my eyes. She said she'd look into it, but the way she said it wasn't reassuring. It felt like she was already closing ranks. I went back to my desk. Another note. This one was longer. "Consider this a reminder," and a preview. I looked around the office. Everyone was working, heads down, but I could feel their eyes on me, waiting. The calls started a few days after they let me go. Not threatening, just wrong. Dial tone, then breathing, always breathing, sometimes a click, like someone hung up before it connected properly. I changed my number, of course. It didn't stop. They'd get the new one within 1 week each time. It wasn't random. They knew when I was home. Once, it was during a doctor's appointment. Another time, while I was at the grocery store. Oren from IT tried to trace the calls, bless him, but it was always a burner, untraceable. He kept saying it was sophisticated, professional even. I thought maybe Garrett had hired someone, paid them to just mess with me. It felt personal enough. Then the things started showing up. Small stuff. My mail forwarded to the old office address, even though I'd updated it with the post office. A parking ticket for a car I hadn't owned in 5 years, registered to my current address. Always something just irritating enough to require hours on the phone explaining things, proving things. I started checking everything. My bank statements, credit reports, online accounts, every single one. And I started checking places. My apartment. Not for someone in it, but for something left. Under the rug, in the back of the closet, behind the shower curtain. Places someone could have been, unnoticed. It felt ridiculous, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Now, even when I stay in hotels, I do it. It's just habit. I pull back the bedspread, not looking for anything specific, just checking, lifting the corners of the curtains, looking under things. It's stupid, I know, but I always do it, every time, and I always wonder how long they were watching before they started. The hum of a failing radiator. That's what brought it all back. I passed a beat-up work van on the highway yesterday, steam curling from under the hood, and suddenly I was right back there. It was the summer after graduation, and we were driving cross-country, a stupid, ambitious road trip planned on a whim. We were somewhere in the Southwest, bouncing between small towns and even smaller gas stations, when his vehicle finally gave out. The sun was brutal, even through the tinted van windows. I'd managed to get the engine cool enough to check the distributor cap again. It still looked fine. Alton had mentioned something about a fuel pump relay once, but that felt ambitious. I wasn't a mechanic. I was a photographer, and Alton was a guy who said he knew about cars mostly. He just liked talking about them. I tried the payphone again. Same thing, dial tone clear as a bell. I punched in the number for roadside assistance, heard it ring, and then nothing. Just dead air. I held it, listening for a busy signal. Anything, nothing. I hung up and tried again. Same result. It was weird, not broken phone weird, more like they weren't answering, which didn't make sense. I walked into that little diner, the one with the faded turquoise paint. Denise was behind the counter wiping it down with a rag. She looked up and gave me a little wave. I asked if she'd had any trouble with the phone lines. She frowned. Nope, been fine all day. Why? Just couldn't get through to anyone. Thought maybe there was an outage. She shrugged. Sometimes the signal's weak out here. You're kinda in a dead zone. She handed me a coffee. Alton send you back for more? Yeah, I said, surprised she remembered him. Said he might need a wrench. That boy. Always tinkering. Does he owe you money again? I laughed. A short, brittle sound. Something like that. It wasn't a huge amount, honestly, 200. But Alton had been slow to pay me back for gas and supplies the last few legs of the trip. I figured he was just disorganized. Artists, right? He's a good kid, though, Denise said, smiling. Just a little flighty. I finished my coffee and went back to the van. Alton was still under the hood, muttering to himself. I didn't mention the phone. I didn't want to worry him. It was probably just the signal. I was sure of it. The van wouldn't start. It just clicked, over and over. I tried everything. The battery seemed fine. I don't know about the fuel pump. I'm not a mechanic, obviously. Alton wasn't around. I figured he'd gone into town for parts. That turquoise diner was the only option. Irene was behind the counter, wiping it down with the same damp cloth she used before. She didn't say anything, just looked at me. I asked if there was a mechanic in town, and she finally nodded towards a card tacked to the corkboard. Theron, she said flatly. He's particular. The phone still wasn't working. There were no bars. I tried again, just in case. Nothing. I asked Irene if she'd had trouble getting a signal. She paused, her hand still on the cloth. Sometimes, she said. Depends. Depends on what? I didn't ask. I just copied down Theron's number and headed back to the van. While I was walking, I noticed a car parked approximately 100 yards down the road. It was a dark sedan. I didn't recognize it, but I didn't think much of it. People passed through, but it was still there when I came back from talking to Theron, and Theron was fast. Too fast. He had the van running in under 10 minutes. He said it was a loose wire. He charged me an outrageous amount, but I paid it. I just wanted to leave. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The sedan was gone. I took a different route than the one I'd planned. I headed south, towards Bia's place. Bia always had a landline, and she wouldn't ask questions. It was a longer drive, but I felt safer. Then I realized, about halfway there, I hadn't seen another car for miles. Usually, even on these back roads, you see someone. It felt like I was the only one out here, like someone had cleared the road for me. Maybe Theron knew something. Maybe that car was just someone curious about a broken-down van. I really needed to stop thinking about it. I pulled into the lot behind the diner, figuring I'd try the phone again. Still nothing. Absolutely nothing. It wasn't even registering a signal, just blank. That's when I saw him, Alton, standing by the dumpster, just watching. He didn't wave, didn't acknowledge me, just stood there. He hadn't said much at the diner, just refilled my coffee twice, never looking me in the eye. I got out, figuring maybe he knew something about the cell service. "Alton?" I called out. He didn't respond until I was almost on top of him. He was looking at the ground, kicking at a loose piece of gravel. When he finally looked up, his eyes, they were different. Not angry, not anything I could name, just flat, empty. "Theron sent me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "He wanted me to make sure you got settled." Settled? What did that even mean? I started to ask, but he cut me off. "There's a place just outside of town. Kit's place. He's expecting you. Theron said you might need somewhere to stay for a bit." He handed me a key, a heavy old-fashioned iron key. It felt cold in my hand. "Don't go anywhere else. Just Kit's place." Then a truck. A flatbed hauling scrap metal. It rumbled past, drowning out everything. When the noise died down, Alton was gone. Vanished. I looked around, but he was nowhere to be seen. It was like he'd been waiting for that truck to pass. Theron was being protective, I guess. Maybe he thought I was rattled after the breakdown. Maybe he was worried about me being alone out here. It was a little strange the way it was all happening, but I figured it was just small-town kindness. I found Kit's place easily enough. A tiny cabin on the edge of the woods. It smelled like dust and mothballs. I locked the door, feeling not safe. Exactly, but watched. And I couldn't shake the image of Alton's eyes. I didn't sleep much. Every creak of the cabin felt intentional, like someone was testing the wood, seeing how much noise it would make before I noticed. By morning, I just needed to leave. I needed to be around people. I drove back to the diner, hoping Alton would be there. He wasn't. Denise was working the counter. She didn't seem surprised to see me. "Trouble with the car still?" she asked, wiping down the formica. I told her about Kit's cabin, about feeling watched. She just nodded slowly. "Alton mentioned you stayed there, said Kit's a bit reclusive." I asked about Theron. Denise's face tightened. "Theron, he comes in sometimes. He does odd jobs around here, mostly for Lorne." Lorne. Another name. I asked about Lorne, but Denise just said he kept to himself and owned a lot of the land around here. I needed to call for a tow for help, but the cell service was still dead. Denise let me use the landline to call my insurance. While I was on hold, I started taking pictures. The cabin, the road leading up to it, the diner itself, anything. I wanted to have something, some proof that this wasn't just me losing it. The insurance company said they couldn't find any record of my policy. That's when it really started to feel wrong. I rechecked the number, the policy details. Everything was right, but they insisted it didn't exist. I asked Denise to try calling them, to confirm. She did. The result was the same. It was Lorne, wasn't it? He was buying up everything, controlling everything. He'd somehow gotten to my insurance, erased my coverage. A power play, maybe, trying to force me to deal with his people. I felt a surge of anger, then a cold dread. This wasn't just a broken-down car anymore. This was something else. As I was packing my camera away, I noticed the pictures weren't saving. The memory card was completely blank. It's been years. I still think about that place, but not like I used to. Not with the same panic. It's more like a weight, a dull ache. I finished the documentary eventually. It was a watered-down version, really. I couldn't get anyone interested in the full story. Too many gaps, too much that didn't make sense. They wanted timelines and evidence. I had feelings. I tried to track down Alton, the mechanic. He was gone, just vanished. Denise was gone too. The diner's boarded up now, windows broken. Theron still lives around there. I heard, but he won't meet my eyes if he sees me. He just looks straight through. I figured for a long time it was about the land. Lorne wanted the whole valley, and anyone who didn't sell was persuaded. That made sense. Corporate greed, small-town intimidation, neat and tidy. I moved back to the city. I went back to shooting weddings. It was easy money, safe, but I stopped taking assignments in rural areas. I just stopped. It wasn't a conscious decision, not at first. A photographer friend asked me to do a destination wedding in upstate New York, a big estate with a lot of acreage. I started getting that feeling again, the one in my chest, tightness. I made up an excuse and said I was booked. Now, it's automatic. If a job comes across my desk that mentions cabins or long drives on back roads or anything remotely like that valley, I delete the email. I don't even read it. It's not fear exactly. It's knowing that some places just aren't worth finding out what's wrong with them. I avoid antique stores now too. They always remind me of Kit's cabin, the smell of old wood and dust, the feeling of being watched. Even thinking about it makes my palms sweat. It's ridiculous, I know, but I just can't. I was scrolling through a local online forum the other day, mostly just checking for lost pets, and someone posted about a similar situation to one I'd lived through last year. A neighbor asking for help, a little too much trust extended, and then things getting complicated. It wasn't the details that caught my attention, but the feeling of the story, the unsettling way it unfolded. Reading it made me realize I never really talked about what happened, not to anyone. The leaves were really coming down hard that November. I was trying to get the last of them off the lawn before the first real freeze. That's when Ray came over. Again, she'd been asking for little things for weeks. You know, a cup of sugar, help reaching something on a high shelf, borrowing a screwdriver, all perfectly normal neighbor stuff, but always when I was already in the middle of something. This time it was birdseed. "Oh, Arlen," she said, standing on the sidewalk like she hadn't just seen me wrestling with the leaf blower. "I'm terribly out, and the little finches are just counting on me. Would you possibly—" I sighed and killed the blower. It felt like I could never just finish a task anymore. "Sure, Ray. Be right back." I had a huge bag in the garage. When I came back out, she wasn't just standing there, she was watching me. Not in a creepy way, exactly, just intently. And she was holding her phone pointed in our direction. "Oh, just taking a picture of the leaves," she said quickly, too quickly, when she saw me look. "They're so vibrant this year." It felt weird. I handed her the birdseed. She thanked me profusely, then mentioned, almost as an afterthought, "You know, Weston was just saying he needs someone to check his gutters. He's afraid of heights." Weston lived 2 houses down. I hadn't even met Weston. I remember thinking, okay, this is just a really social lady trying to connect people, trying to be helpful. It was a little much, but harmless. I told her I'd think about it. Later that afternoon, I was inside making coffee and heard a car pull up. I looked out the window and it was Weston. He waved at me. Just waved. Didn't come to the door, just a quick wave. Then he drove off. It was so strange, like he was acknowledging something. I didn't answer when Opal called the next day. I just let it go to voicemail. It was Tuesday, garbage day. I usually put the bins out the night before, but I'd forgotten. When I went out to do it, Weston was already on his lawn, raking leaves. He wasn't even looking at me, just meticulously moving leaves into perfect piles. But I knew he knew I was there. He'd timed it. I hurried, trying not to make eye contact. As I was pulling the bin back up the driveway, Opal came out of her house. She walked right over to Weston, and they started talking, both of them glancing at my house. It wasn't a friendly chat, more like a briefing. I ducked inside. I started taking a different route to work after that. Usually, I cut through the little park 2 blocks over, saving 5 minutes. But I started going the long way around. Even though it meant sitting in traffic, I convinced myself it was just avoiding the awkwardness of running into Opal. It felt ridiculous, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. Then, last Friday, I realized it wasn't just Opal. I was at the grocery store, and I thought I saw Ray, the woman who lives across from Weston, standing in the produce section. She wasn't looking at the apples, she was looking at me. When I turned to get a better look, she was gone. I'd never really spoken to Ray. She keeps to herself. But when I got home, there was a small package on my porch, no note, just a box. Inside was a book on bird watching. I don't even like birds. It was Alma's favorite hobby, my wife, before she left. Weston must have asked Ray about it. He was trying to be thoughtful. A pathetic attempt to connect, maybe? It was unsettling, but I told myself it was just a clumsy effort to be kind. It had to be. The bird book, it just sat there on the kitchen table. I kept expecting to put it away, donate it, something, but I didn't. It felt wrong to touch it, like acknowledging it somehow made it real. And then the light started flickering. Not like a bulb about to go, but a deliberate on-off, always when I was alone. I started checking the breaker, of course, nothing. Then I noticed Bev's car. She lives 3 houses down, the one with all the garden gnomes. She started parking at the end of my driveway, not in it, just facing the house, every evening, like she was waiting for something. I thought maybe she needed help with groceries or was having car trouble and it was easier to angle it that way. I almost offered, almost. Last night was different. I was up late, trying to read, and I heard a scraping at the back door, like someone was trying to get in with a key. I grabbed the baseball bat, just in case. When I got there, the door was fine, no scratches, but there was a small pile of stones arranged on the patio, shaped like a bird. A crude little thing, but deliberate. I went outside, heart hammering. That's when I saw Weston. He wasn't across the street or walking his dog. He was in my garden, crouched by the rose bushes, holding a pair of pruning shears. He didn't look up when I called his name. He just clipped a rose, then another, and another. He was making a bouquet. When he finally turned, he didn't seem surprised to see me. He just smiled, a slow, empty smile, and held out the roses. "For Alma," he said. "She always loved these." I didn't take them. I just backed away. I got in the car and drove. I don't know where I went, just away. I'm at a motel now. I think it's them. All of them. They're trying to replace her, to fill the void. It's sick. It's just sick. And I can't shake the feeling that the bird book was a warning. The motel room smelled like stale cigarettes and disinfectant. I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards above, every car that slowed down outside the window, I kept expecting to see them. I called the police, finally. I explained about the roses, the gifts, and the feeling of being watched. The officer, a young guy, mostly just listened. He took notes and asked a few questions. He seemed pretty dismissive, honestly. He said people grieve in different ways, and sometimes neighbors try to be helpful. He took my statement about the parking, the lights, and everything, but I could tell he thought I was unstable. He did run a check on Weston, though. That was something. It turns out Weston wasn't a retired accountant, as he said. He was a behavioral psychologist. He specialized in grief counseling specifically, and stalking. That's what the officer said, almost under his breath, stalking intervention. It made everything click. It wasn't about replacing Sarah. It was about studying grief. It was about observing a breakdown. He'd been setting things up, triggering reactions. The bird book, the specific flowers he was testing me. I asked the officer if he'd arrest him. He said not without more evidence. Weston hadn't broken any laws. Not exactly. Just odd. He suggested I get a restraining order. I did. Then I packed up and drove further, to my sister Bev's place. I thought if I just disappeared, got out of their orbit, it would stop. Bev wasn't thrilled, but she let me stay. But yesterday, I found a small, smooth stone on her doorstep. A gray river stone, just like the ones Weston used to arrange in his garden, and Bev mentioned casually that a man had been asking about me at the library. She described him as helpful, concerned. He said he wanted to make sure I was adjusting okay. It wasn't Weston, it was someone else, and it wasn't about the house anymore. It wasn't about the neighborhood. They found me. They always knew where I was going. It's been years. I don't talk about it much. Bev thinks I've mostly moved on. She says I seem grounded. I don't know about grounded. I just don't mention the roses, or the stones, or the way people used to look at me. It's easier that way. For a while after I moved in with Bev, it was mostly just the feeling, that prickling on the back of my neck, the sense of being observed. Then the little things started again, not the direct stuff, like packages or people at the door. It was more subtle. Bev's mail got delivered to the wrong box, but always with a card from someone I'd never seen. Her car tires were subtly deflated, things she'd dismiss as accidents. I started noticing it too. Small rearrangements in her living room. A book moved from the coffee table to the shelf. A picture frame turned slightly askew. I thought maybe she was just absent-minded, stressed with work. But it kept happening, and always when she wasn't looking. I convinced myself it was Irene, Weston's wife. I figured she blamed me for something, for disrupting their quiet life maybe, for making Weston look strange. I started avoiding her if I saw her at the grocery store. I'd cross the aisle, pretend to be on a call. Then, one day, Bev came home with a new bird feeder. She said a man at the hardware store had recommended it and said it would attract cardinals. She described him as friendly, a bit of a bird enthusiast. He'd asked about her sister, about how I was settling in. He hadn't seemed malicious, just interested. And it wasn't Irene. It couldn't be. Irene was frail and barely left the house. This man was strong-looking. Now, whenever someone new shows a little too much interest, a little too much concern, I check the locks, every single one. Even if I just came in 5 minutes ago, it's automatic. I don't even think about it anymore. Just click, click, click. And then I wonder if the sound carries.